Welcome to Talent Pop Podcast, where we will provide tips and strategies for success in sales, networking, marketing, and business. We will be learning from real stories that will inspire you to unlock your potential, discover your talents, and develop the confidence to take action on your biggest dreams. We are focused on empowering women to connect their passions with their purpose to find true fulfillment. It's time to pop off, queens.
Pop off, queens! Hi, Cate. Welcome to Talent Pop. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to have you on and really just, getting to the next level with our podcast here. We're really diving into, meeting more business leaders and entrepreneurs and powerful females in the business. And I'm so impressed with your company and your founder and CEO of Luminary. We had a chance to get to see, I brought few company members with me, and we had a chance to attend your event that you had. You're doing a global, national event.
Yeah.
Where you're traveling around and doing events and networking events, and as well as educational opportunities and presentations for folks around the country. So I'd love to have you share your story, just the inspiration behind Luminary. I had a chance to meet some amazing women within your company and just super impressed by that. And then just, how things have been going and a little bit about your journey. So welcome and thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me. And it was great to meet you and the Recruiter Boom team, a number of them in person in Boston a few weeks ago. I'll talk a little bit about the tour and why we're on that in a moment. But my story is I spent close to 20 years in corporate and investment banking, working at three of the largest banks in the world: JP Morgan, Bank of America, HSBC. 90% of those roles were in a sales capacity, client facing, building businesses, and loved it. I started my career in tech, and before that even nonprofit, but was recruited into banking and never really had a background in thinking that I would go into finance. I didn't have a finance degree. I'd never taken an accounting course. I'd never even taken a business course in college, and was recruited into working for a bank. Thought I would do that for a few years. And then lo and behold, almost 20 years later, I was still doing it. I loved it. People always ask, well, you started your own company, you must have hated it, and it was male dominated. It was male dominated, of course, but I loved it and I love what I did. Part of that was having impact every day on clients, and the other was having impact every day on our firm, our people, and investing in talent and looking at the pipeline. On the side of my desk, like many women do, they volunteer for their women's network or their women's ERG or BRG. And so I had started doing that early in my career. And then as I got more senior, took a more active role in how do you influence policy? How do you make sure these networking groups, these affinity groups were set up for success? And so very long story short, as anyone that's listening and has ever done that, it is a thankless job in that it's great because you're very passionate and you're trying to do everything, but that's not your day job. And so it's on the side of our desks. And as I saw it in finance and certainly in banking, there were more women as that were coming in. I wasn't seeing enough progress in the pipeline. I wasn't seeing enough women getting opportunities. Compensation was still lower. And so in 2018, having a lot of experience, not just in the finance world, but my clients were multinational companies around the world, I really started to take a look at what was driving behavior and why were women leaving. And it wasn't just because they were having children. If they were, how are we providing a roadmap back into those jobs? And at the same time, I was watching this whole environment of women starting businesses and the founder community and venture capital. And then again, before the pandemic, all of these women that were on their third or fourth careers and thinking about what was next for them. And so light bulb moment in my head, I wrote a business plan for what was now Luminary, really about bringing women and male allies together, regardless of professional journey. And so whether you're building your own business, you're working, you're climbing the corporate ladder, or you're just figuring out your next step, how do we convene together and through content and programming and really upskilling? And so early 2019, Luminary was born. We started as a physical space here in New York City, and where I'm sitting today. And we were about 13 months old when the pandemic hit. And that's super relevant because we don't identify as a co-working space. We really identify as a community. We hold and we're hosting, prior to the pandemic, about 5 events and workshops and courses every single week. And so when the pandemic happened, obviously we had to shut down, but that was actually a silver lining for us, because what we realized was it wasn't just about the space, it was about the community and the programming. We also have a B2B and a B2C model. So we have individual members and we have corporate members, everyone from JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs to Spotify and Paramount and Kimberly-Clark. And what we realized was they're women and they're male allies that were participating in our programming, and the community didn't have to be in New York anymore. They could be anywhere in the world. And so for us, it was a rapid accelerator to reaching more women around the country and around the world, which then led to last year making the decision that once the pandemic sort of slowed down, or at least the surge in COVID slowed down, we wanted to get on the road and meet our members and meet our communities, and where we had now people that we'd never met in person. And so Boston was one stop on our 10-city national tour. We have 5 more left, and it's really about bringing that community, that content, all of that, and connection into these cities. We'll always have virtual, we'll always be hybrid, but how do we make sure we know who's on the ground and what are they asking for outside of what we're already providing? So a very long way to share the story, but I couldn't have done this. I couldn't have started my company. I couldn't still be here after a crazy pandemic and a looming recession without all of the experience that I had in my corporate life and my corporate career and building businesses and learning the fundamentals of running a business, and certainly from a sales side, which I talk a lot about, and running a P&L. So that has given me those skill sets that I've now, transferred into running my own company.
Amazing. Amazing. And yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to navigating through that whole pandemic situation, especially when your original vision is like, hey, we're all going to come together and meet each other. And then all of a sudden, like, I guess, how did you turn events virtual? Like, how did that kind of help your business? I mean, I know how it affected our business, but I'd love to hear how it affected yours.
Yeah, so we actually, before New York went on full lockdown, we sort of saw it happening, right? We were watching what was happening on the West Coast and certainly in Europe. And I got with our team and said, regardless of this is going to last 2 weeks, remember, we were all thinking it was 2 weeks of toilet paper and food. We said, well, we can't stop the programming. We have all these great events. It was Women's History Month. And so we said, let's just get a Zoom account. I don't even know what that is, but I talked to an intern and said, get a free account and we'll put some of these online, and it's a means to an end. And lo and behold, we're now, 2.5 years into it. We've hosted probably 3,000 Zooms. And it really, for us, changed the way we thought about reaching our community, because the New York area is amazing, but so many people were leaving. And we like to say we literally went online overnight. So by the time New York was locked down, we were still hosting events. We were still getting to our members. We were bringing worthwhile content relevant to what was going on in the world. And we really try to focus on that, not just career development, but what's happening, if it's mental health, if it's working mothers or parents. And that's really how we adapted to the landscape and said, well, we'll continue doing this until the world changes again. And the world has changed again, right? Because now we're in a hybrid environment, and that's to our benefit as well.
Yeah. And I could see how, your business is going to, I definitely want to ask you about your vision going forward, but I could see how things are so fluid, right? I mean, things are just, the market's changing. I mean, we're experiencing this right now, and just being able to adapt to that, and then being that support for all of these, women going through this. And I guess, like what's the kind of the next step for Luminary? Where do you see it going?
I think when we think now about time, and it's like that question we used to get right when you interview for your job, like, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? I think it's really hard to answer now just because of what we've gone through and what we continue to go through. And as business owners with a potential recession and what's happening with inflation and costs and labor, I don't know if I have a full, like, here's where we're going to be. What I know is the tour thus far has allowed us to meet more of our community, also talk to more companies. That's a big part of our business model is working and supporting our corporate members. So we went from, 20 to now over 70 in the span of 2 years. And so how do we continue to make sure we're having that impact? For me, it's, of course, financially want to make sure you're doing well and the company is sustainable and profitable, but more importantly, it's that impact. And so as we think about 2023, getting out to more cities, whether that's geographically expanding or not, stay tuned. And then also thinking about the companies that we're working with and the entrepreneurs that we work with, and making sure that we're bringing that content that allows them to succeed in whatever definition of success looks like for them. And so that's my focus, and obviously building up our partnerships with some of the big companies that we work with, like a Verizon and Indeed and JP Morgan, and thinking more strategically about what we can do for the women in our community, the women in their companies, and then the women in these communities that need us.
So I'd love to learn a little bit about the business model too, because this is definitely something I'm curious about as a fellow entrepreneur. I love to learn about how your business thrives, right? So it sounds like you've got some memberships that you offer to, on a corporate level, and then on like a personal, like say if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to be a member, I'd love to kind of hear like what your offerings are in that regard.
Yeah. So when I did the business plan, I knew, the 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 is a really hard model, right? From a B2C perspective. And it takes a lot, and it takes a lot of marketing dollars to be able to create awareness. And we've done very little on paid social at all. But I knew the corporate model, because I came from that world. That's where I needed to focus a lot of our efforts, because you could actually have that 1-to-1 to many, and impact grows, plus the opportunity to be extremely diverse and inclusive. So our B2C model is really that member to member to member. So much of it is word of mouth, referral. We have an incredible ambassador program, and building on that. And we will continue to focus on that. That's about 30-40% of our revenue. And then our corporate, so the B2B model, is really thinking strategically around the companies that we can work with. What companies are out there talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and what are they actually doing about it? And then every corporate membership that we have it looks a little different, because we want to meet them where they are, not a cookie cutter. We want to understand what's challenging their women, and figure out ways that we can support that. We like to say we complement what they're already doing internally, we're not trying to replace it. And that's the kind of the two models. And then certainly from a space standpoint, here in New York, we have 15,000 square feet. We have a rooftop bar and restaurant, and we have an incredible space. So there's an events component of that. And then the last piece is we have a fellowship program. So when we think about B2B and supporting companies internally, the other thing that we saw in the beginning of the pandemic was a lot of companies coming out and saying, I want to support business owners and women business owners. And really, when you peel back the layers, you're not really doing much other than saying we're support. So we created a fellowship program. We now have 7 fellowship programs through our different corporate relationships. We'll announce 3 more in the fall, where that's actually sponsoring and supporting, in particular, women business owners around the country, and giving them access to our membership and our resources. And about 80% of that, of those fellowships have been provided to women of color, which is a big part of who we are too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love your mission. I can definitely relate to it. And I love what you're doing, and it's really exciting. Do you have, any challenges that you're up against in particular at the moment?
One, I think if you look at our community, I always now, going through this as a business owner and then watching our small business owners, I think the challenge is going to be what happens to our economy, right? And, we're keeping a very close eye on that, from dip in revenue, membership, are people starting to pull back on their spending, which we know they are, and how will that translate into financial impact for us? Two is costs, right? Costs are rising, whether from labor to goods to food for the restaurant that we run. And then even just around travel, right? We're on this tour, and I've seen just in the last 3 months, the cost of travel and entertainment just rising dramatically. So yeah. So for me, it's all around expense management. I think making sure we understand, and I see that as a challenge as we head into the fall and into 2023. And as a former banker, you've got to pay attention to these issues, right? And these are things that are out of our control, but you can manage to mitigate them in some ways. One of that's liquidity and cash reserves and making sure you've got enough runway. Two, thinking about, what are the credit facilities that are out there that you could tap into. I don't think if there's a recession, we're going to see another stimulus package. So small businesses and businesses like myself have to just continue to make sure that we're nimble and adaptable and really thinking about how do we manage costs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being smart about our choices and sometimes making tough decisions too. And I don't know if you've had to experience that. I mean, I know.
Oh yeah.
Definitely something, that we're learning every day. Right. And we're forced to, especially as leaders and business owners, we have to make, tough decisions sometimes. And, but it's for the future, it's for our vision and what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, when the pandemic hit and so I think it was by April, we had lost about 80% of our revenue because people were panicking, right? They didn't know what was happening. And so we looked at our financials. We had made a lot of, expense cuts and basically, one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make in my career was sitting down with a team on Zoom, right? And saying, I've looked at the financials. Here's where we're at, right? I can either lay you all off and you can get, government assistance. I can fire you or furlough you. And you can come back to your jobs, or you can take a pay cut, but I'm leaving it up to you as employees, right? Because I wanted them to make a decision for them and their careers and also their well-being and livelihood. And every single one of them took a pay cut. Wow. And then by September, everyone was back to their original salaries, right? But I had to kind of go through that, and yes, leaving it up to employees was also part of that. But for me, it was a very difficult conversation. We were 14 months old at that point, right? Yeah. To then say, we've built this amazing business, to now have to deliver tough news. That's that. And then the other is just really being, my team gives me a hard time because they're like, you look at every dollar. Yeah, I will look at every dollar, no matter how big we get, because you've got to manage to a number. And I think there are a lot of business owners out there that just sort of have the finger in the air. Like, if I'm making money, then I'm making money. And that's a recipe for disaster in my mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing these tough decisions, because, I know that, companies across the country are struggling with this right now. I mean, obviously we have to speak to the market. We've seen layoffs. We've seen a lot of things happen. And I think definitely listeners are, and watchers are going to be curious about, these decisions and how they're handled and what to do. And I think it's a constant, learning experience. It's a constant growth experience, and every company's different too. And I'm sure you have a lot of different, I don't know the makeup of your company, probably have some salespeople that are dealing with, corporate partnerships. And I don't know if you have a commission model or approach. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's so hard to say, hey, this is the right thing, or this is the blanket thing to do. Yeah.
And also, hiring mistakes, right? I mean, every person you hire, and you'll know this better than most, given what you guys do, right? They don't always work out, right? For lots of different reasons. And so I think particularly for women, we take things very personally. We're very self-critical. And so that the person you hired that doesn't work out for lots of different reasons, the tough decisions, I have to be tough versus always empathetic every single situation. I think that's something that we have to deal with as business owners, but also throughout our career in whatever way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've really had to focus on these last couple of years. And also, by the way, when you don't have a boss telling you what to do, when you're the boss,
Yeah.
right? There is no roadmap. There's no game plan. It's sort of like, I hope I'm doing the right thing. No one's telling me this is what I should be doing. And I think that for me was also a pretty big opportunity to continue to learn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can relate to that 100%. And you know what? As leaders, we're not perfect and we make mistakes. And I think, just having, it's a constant challenge. So everything you're saying is completely resonating with me. And I think, will help a lot of people as well.
And by the way, ask for help, right? No one knows what you need unless you verbalize or vocalize it, right? So you may feel like this is the dumbest question, or I shouldn't be asking. That's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And I think we have to do better at tapping into our network and asking for help and asking for what we need, not just, hey, if you could. No, the worst someone can say, just like we know in sales, the worst thing someone can say is no. I always take a no as a maybe. And then you continue to think about, what's the win-win there. So I think asking for help and really, again, verbalizing where you need, what you need, support, et cetera. And to buy from you, right? You have a business. This is not a charity. You need people to buy from you to support that business so that you can continue to create impact, economic well-being, jobs, et cetera. And I think that's something that's also not talked about enough.
I agree. And this has been such an insightful conversation because I feel like I'm thinking of more topics we can talk about. I mean, I'm reading a book right now about asking for help and not feeling like, as a female, it's like you feel like you have to do everything and you want to be the perfect this and the perfect mom and the perfect, and it's really hard. And we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help, like you said. So I think that's awesome advice for a lot of women out there. So,
and by the way, look at all the women below us, right? I mean, they're looking at us as role models, so we better be role modeling. And we want to create change for that next generation to not think that asking for help is bad, to tap into the internet, to ask for more, to negotiate. So we got to start somewhere, and really think about not just how it applies to us, but that next generation, that future generation of leaders and business owners and founders. That's where I see a huge opportunity for women like you and I.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. I know you're busy. I'm busy. I really appreciate the time, and I think we hit on some really important topics here, and can't wait to chat more about them. I would love to come see your space.
Definitely.
Love to come see what you're doing and just see it all in action. And just so glad we could have these few moments to chat and share some awesome information. So
thanks. Thank you for having me and hosting this. I think advice is always good, right? And storytelling, that's how we learn.
And human connection, for sure.
And human connection. Yes. Yes.
It can feel a little lonely sometimes, especially making decisions and things like that. But this is why these communities are so important, and absolutely love what you're doing out there. So keep up the amazing work, and excited to see where you're going.
Thanks, Amanda. Hopefully we'll see you in New York soon.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, Kate. Take care.
Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.